Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Tina Knight, and I'm the Director of Career and Professional Development on the Penn State Abington campus. We're going to go ahead and get started. We have a lot to cover in a short period of time, so I want to get us going right now. And so first, let me thank you for joining us for ACE That Interview webinar, especially in this current crises that we're in the world. It's important that you hone certain skills during this time so that when things do open, that you're well prepared to get moving with your job search. And I should say this too as well, employers are still hiring right now. And so it is really important that you continuously work on skills like interviewing. And so just a few household things that I want to cover. This is one webinar, which is part of a summer series of webinars being offered through the Penn State Abington Career and Professional Development Office. You can learn more by visiting our website and see the remaining schedule of events throughout the summer. Today's webinar, again, will run approximately 30 to 45 minutes. If you are unable to attend the full session, we will post this particular webinar on our website within, I want to say 24 to 72 hours. And so please check back on our website if you're not able to stay for the remainder of the program. So let's go ahead and get started. Today, we hope to cover what the purpose of an interview is. I know that seems like, well, we all know what that's about, but I want to make sure that I cover exactly what the employer is expecting and then likely what most folks interviewing are expecting. We're going to cover what various interview types, and wonder how many of you have participated in many of those. The importance of impressions, preparing for the interview process and questions, and certainly what to do after the interview. Just for the fun of it, I think this is kind of comical in many ways. Yes, most people really want a job because we need to earn a living, but there should be more to it than that. And so I hope today's webinar really inspires you to think a little bit broader about interviewing and how to present yourself in the best way. Okay, so what is the purpose of an interview? And this is really important for people to note. Interviewing is not just you being drilled about your experience. It really is a two-way communication and interaction that helps each of you determine if this is a right fit. So the interviewee, that would be you, wants to determine what? Do I want this job? Can I do this job? Does this job offer me the opportunities I want for advancement and experience? Will I fit into the culture? This is super important to note as well. Your resume gets you the interview gets you the job. So you do want to take this serious and really prepare. And so I'm thrilled many of you are here today. We have quite a few people on the webinar, and so I think that's great. Now, it's important for you to know what's in it for the interviewer. What are they trying to determine? What are they looking at as they interview with you? What results will you achieve? Everyone wants to know, is this someone who is going to produce? How soon will you become productive? Will I have to take tons and tons of time training this person, or could they quickly get up to speed and ready to go? How much supervision do you need? And my apologies, I see a typo in the presentation. My apologies, that should be how much supervision will you need? Do you generate more value than you cost? Meaning, will I have to invest a ton of training time and lots of time getting you up to speed versus could you begin fairly quickly to produce? Can you become a high performer? Will you fit into the culture? Will you fit in with the team? Will you fit in with the overall organization culture as well as the values of the organization? Will you be fun to work with? Everyone wants to know that their colleagues will be someone who they will enjoy being around for 8+ hours of the day. Are you responsible? Are you self-directed? Are you someone who will take charge of your own career and the responsibilities that you're in charge of? Can you manage your own development? This is really important. A lot of employees look to their managers to direct every a bit of their career development. And it's really important that you be able to take some ownership in that. And so, are you someone that can manage your own development? And very important, will you stay? No one wants to invest the energy, the time that it takes to interview, only for the candidate to leave within 6 months to a year. And so, are you someone that you can, during the interview, are you able to convey that you're someone who will commit to staying? Okay, before the interview, super important that you understand the following. Are you able to fluently and articulately speak to each one of these areas? Your educational background. One thing that's important, as you're a student here at Penn State, please always be thinking about your education. What are you getting out of every class that you've taken, every experience on campus that you're engaging in? I think that's so important to do because employers are going to want to know, what are you getting out of all of this educational experience that you're engaging in? And if you're not able to fluently talk about your courses and what you're gaining from them, I think you do yourself a disservice. So be reflective about your education. You want to certainly talk about experiences, both paid and unpaid. There's lots of value in unpaid experiences, including volunteering, including service in organizations. You want to also speak to your accomplishments and achievements, skills and competencies. I can tell you right now, I'm a tough interview, and if you were not able to answer, at least, well, I probably wouldn't ask you this question this way, but if you were sitting down with me in a mock interview, I certainly would ask you about your skills and competencies. So I think the point I'm trying to make here is, if you're not able to share readily what at least 25 to 30 things that you know you are capable of doing, and more importantly, are you able to back them up with examples? And so, do you know your skills and competencies? Community service, clubs and organizations, extracurricular activities, work ethics, values. You should be able to speak to all of these areas fairly easily. Okay, before the interview, you want to understand the position. Do you know the duties of the position, the compensation range, the location, work schedule, benefits? These are things that, with technology today, you should be able to really go out and find that information on the internet. Certainly some things may not be readily available, but things like compensation range. A lot of people say, well, how would I possibly know what this company is going to offer? You can use tools like salary.com to get at least a sense of the range for someone with your title, with your experience level and background. Again, salary.com is one place to try look for that information. Glassdoor provides a range of firsthand account information for folks. And so those are two tools, but there are many others that I recommend that you begin exploring in order to garner some of this information. Before the interview, understand the organization. There's nothing more embarrassing than showing up on an interview and hopefully you know the organization name, but believe it or not, there are some layers to organizations. I'll give you a good example, Johnson & Johnson. There are many other companies within the Johnson & Johnson family. And so do you know that kind of information? Is it private or public? What products and services do they offer? Who are the key management team names? And then certainly if you're going on an interview, you absolutely have the right to ask whoever contacts you to arrange the interview, who will I be meeting with? Can you share with me the names of the interview committee or team? Okay. So before the interview, understand the types of interviews that you might be invited to engage in. And so please review this list. I'm not going to go through everything in detail, but I want to hit a few highlights. Telephone and screening interviews, likely that's going to be the first step. Someone's probably going to contact you, ask you some preliminary questions. That's very likely to happen. That's certainly happening given that in-person interviewing is not happening as often right now during the pandemic crises. sure enough, you can count on the fact that you will engage in online virtual interviews, things like Skype, Zoom. And so that's something you want to be prepared for. Video interviews. There could be a company that says, I actually want you to complete an interview via video and send that to us. So that's another way that interviews are happening. Interviewing with headhunters and employment agencies. This is very popular if you're going to use a third source to help you with your job search. And so headhunters and employment agencies are definitely options there. Please know if you meet with them, you should view that as an interview. If they're going to send you out to different organizations representing their particular agency, please view it as a interview like no other interview. There are definitely second, third, or multiple interviews that you will engage in. Panel interviews, and I want to stress the difference between a panel and a group interview. Panel interviews typically involve more than one person interviewing you at a time. It could be upwards of 5 people, 6 people, and even more. The difference between a panel interview and a group interviews are oftentimes, there are groups of candidates that are brought together to interview at one time for a position. Promotion interviews, that's something that will happen later in your career as you excel in your work and then want to get promoted into a new position. Breakfast, lunch, and dinner interviews. Many people ask, why does career and professional development offer dining etiquette? Well, we offer dining etiquette for reasons that you see here. Oftentimes you will be invited for an interview over a meal. And so you want to make sure you're attending to nuances like which fork should I be using? How much money should I, should I allow for the meal that I'm ordering? And so it's really important if you have a chance to attend an event like a dining etiquette event, please do so. It is super important that you understand the nuances, dining etiquette, exercise your dining etiquette skills, and really be prepared. Oftentimes, those interviews are set up in a way that the employer is really observing you. So for example, if you're someone who's going to work in sales and you're going to be taking clients out, certainly they want to know, are you able to conduct yourself with poise and grace and showcase etiquette during a meal experience? Okay, simulation interviews. This is where you'll be asked to actually do some type of work and simulate exactly what it would be like if you were on the job. On-site interviews at headquarters, oftentimes you will be flown into, let's say you're here in the Philadelphia region, but your company headquarters is in Texas. You may be flown there to have the actual final interview. Testing interview. This is where you might be tested on your skills. For example, if you say you're competent in Excel, you may be asked to test in that particular skill set. Job fair interviews. When you go to job fairs, there are many interviews. I know employers don't have time to spend a ton of time with you, but please know that is an actual real interview. They are assessing your ability from the moment you approach to the end of the interaction. A stress interview, believe it or not, this is real. Stress interviews are really designed to put you under pressure to see how you might react. And so that's something to keep in mind that does happen, especially depending on the industry that you might end up being a part of. And then finally, the one that we're going to spend a little bit of time on today is behavioral and performance-based interviews. These are probably the most popular type of interview, no matter what the medium is in which the interview takes place, whether it's in person or remote. Behavioral interviewing is very popular. Okay, before the interview, understand first impressions count. Please, 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 first impressions are everything, and you want to attend to all of the nuances and all of the details that make up who you are. And so something to think about is 4 seconds, people gain 1 impression. 10 seconds, people gain 11 impressions. Impressions include everything from personal appearance, grooming, eye contact, body language, articulation, personality, and even handshake. I think handshakes might be going by the wayside, given all that we've been through over the last several months, but it's still something to note because some people still believe in the traditional way of conducting business, which is via handshake. But think about it. Everyone's making impressions just based on meeting you for a few minutes. And so it's important that you're attending to all of these areas, especially on an interview. All right, before the interview, you want to plan what you'll wear. And yes, even virtual and online interviews, do not take that for granted. Please, I was on the call with a recruiter the other day, and she indicated that yes, it is still important for people to dress up. And so I want you to pay attention to what you're wearing. Even if you are sitting at a desk conducting an online interview, there's something about being fully dressed up that makes you even conduct yourself in a different way. And so please be mindful of what you're wearing and attend to things that it's the more conservative the company and organization that you are interested in, the more I say you want to think about formal attire, including a suit. And for men, that means suit and a tie. Now, some organizations will tell you it's not necessary for you to dress up. That does not mean you show up in your favorite t-shirt that has a logo or, some quirky saying on it. What that means is that you should still come professionally dressed. It may not mean that you wear a suit jacket, but that you still should wear professional attire. If you're uncertain what that really looks like for you, given your wardrobe, given your budget, would you please reach out to Career and Professional Development, where a counselor can work with you one-on-one. We also offer a career closet where you can obtain business attire for free, as well as for slightly discounted. Okay, so please know that you have options for career attire. But that really goes to making a great first impression. All right, normally during this presentation, I show a very funny video on handshaking, but I have to be honest with you, I've actually heard from several companies that said we're no longer allowed to shake hands. So I'm not gonna take our time here to show that video just because I think handshaking, especially in this current crisis that we're all in, I think that's really not an important thing right now. And so I'm going to hold off on that, but please know there's a lot out there about handshaking if you want to learn more. All righty, before the interview, plan ahead. If you have an in-person interview, plan ahead and make sure you have enough copies of your resume to distribute to the committee. Even though you've sent it in and it's part of the applicant tracking system, there is a likelihood that they may not have a copy of it. And so you want them to be aware. And so bring multiple copies of your resume. Ideally, if you're in person, you want a Pitfalls, pen and paper. I even think having a Pitfalls, even when you're conducting a virtual interview, it speaks to a level of professionalism. You certainly want to make sure you have the interviewer's information so that if you show up to speak with a receptionist and you can easily say, I'm here to see, John Smith, and move on from there. You want to make sure you have questions to ask. I think as someone who does quite a bit of interviewing, it's a little disheartening when someone comes to an interview and they have no questions to ask at the end or throughout the interview. So be prepared. What do you want to know before you leave that conversation? If necessary, I recommend a small bottle of water. I don't think anyone's going to fault you for doing that. I know there's lots of rules people say, but having water is never going to be a problem, as everyone recognizes. Sometimes you need to take a little drink, especially if you're doing a lot of talking. Okay, before the interview, a few more tips to note. Some general tips: map out your route to the interview. So again, speaking to in-person interviews, arrive 10 to 15 minutes early. Be polite to everyone. everyone along the way. This is not the day, if you have an interview, it's not the day to, yell at somebody in who's driving behind you or in front of you or on the side of you. You never know. It could be someone that's showing up to the very same place you're going to interview. How embarrassing would that be? So be polite to everyone. And I'm going to give you a special tip. Especially be polite to security guards, be polite to those that are greeting you, whether in a reception area or, who's greeting you at the office. These people have a tremendous amount of power. And so I can tell you right now, they will let the potential manager or boss, they will let them know how you conducted yourself. And so I want to stress the point, be polite to everyone. I hope you're like that anyway, but especially on interview day, it's not the day to, act any way other than polite. Leave at home. And I know this sounds strange that I have to say some of these, but I think it's important that I emphasize, please, friends and family, it's inappropriate to bring them on an interview unless there is a special invite that says, please invite so-and-so to join. Your cell phone, bad manners, negativity. Again, you can see this full list here. It's really, really important that you try to streamline what you bring so that you're not worried about all of these different gadgets. I definitely do not recommend you bring tobacco products, gum, candy. Coffee or tea would be very inappropriate. Water is appropriate, but coffee and tea would not. I think that would err on the side of being a little bit too casual. And certainly leave at home any offensive topics. And we know the big ones, anything political, sexual, anything that is about race or gender, anything that could potentially turn off an employer, or those taboo topics that I think we're all pretty much aware of. But if you're not, please contact Career and Professional Development. We would love to work with you around that. Okay, few more things before the interview. Practice interviewing. Please note Interview Stream. Interview Stream is a platform that is available to all Penn Staters. It is a free tool that will allow you to conduct a mock interview online. You can do this in the privacy of your home at 3 o'clock in the morning if that's what you desire. But Interview Stream, basically a virtual interviewer comes on, they will interview you, ask you questions. It is all recorded. You can go back and you can view it, or you can send it to people to get feedback. So for example, you could send it to a career counselor. You could send it to a mentor or a colleague or a friend and ask for feedback on your performance. Interview Stream, please, you will find it on the Career and Professional Development webpage. And all Penn Staters, as long as you have a PSU.edu email address, you will be able to access that platform. Alumni, if you are part of the Alumni Association and have the alumni account, you certainly can access it as well. So you want to conduct mock interviews as often as possible. I have been in this field for a really long time, but anytime I am interviewing, I conduct mock interviews. I'm very fortunate to have a husband who is a recruiter, so oftentimes I can bounce ideas off of him. Review probable questions, and we're going to look at some momentarily. And don't forget, prepare questions to ask. All right, online interviews. I do want to take a moment to really talk about this for a second. Some special tips. Determine the best hardware to use. Obviously, the employer will determine what platform, whether it's Zoom, Skype, Google, whatever the platform is that they use as a company is likely what you'll have to adapt to. But you need to understand it, know it, well before the interview. And so it might be worth a slight investment if necessary to be able to get more familiarized with the platform that they're using. Select the proper location for the interview. And I have to tell you, if you're not certain about your background or whatever, the best thing to do is back yourself up into a corner. You can never go wrong with that, because then there would be nothing distracting in the background. And so if you're not able to stage your area so that everyone, can see your your, so no one can see, maybe your background, I recommend that you put yourself into a corner with a chair, maybe a table in front of you to hold your desktop or your laptop. That's really important. I think that impression, I have seen quite a bit during this crisis over these last several months when we've been remote. I've seen people's junky bedrooms, unmade beds, and this is no judgment. It's not a judgment, but it does speak to, if you're interviewing, it speaks to your level of seriousness. And so I would encourage you, find a quiet space where you can kind of back up into a corner. Make sure and test all of your technology. Make sure it's working. And you can, if you don't have anyone that you can do that with personally, you certainly can contact our office and we can run through all of that with you. Schedule at least one mock interview. Again, I can't say that enough. Plan for glitches. And so let's say that the technology goes out. Do you have a phone number that you can call from the employer? And so plan for any glitches or any problems that may come your way. Another ideal could be if you're using a desktop and maybe you have a secondary source like a laptop or a phone, how would you quickly pivot and get on one of those devices should your primary device go down? Turn off all devices, all electronics, all notifications, anything that beeps, or will go off and ring during your interview should be turned off, okay? Remember your nonverbals. The only way they're gonna see you is through the computer, and so you wanna be aware that you're not slouching or that you're not, putting your head to the side as if you're unengaged. And so be aware of your nonverbals. And again, that's something we could work with you on if you have a concern. Definitely bring notes. And I know that sounds strange, like I don't want to bring notes to this interview, but it's okay. It's okay to have your notebook in front of you, especially on an online interview, because they're not going to see your full range of notes. And so it's okay to, pull from some of the, jot down some notes and bullet points that you want to highlight. And then don't forget, it's okay to take a pause before you respond. I know with online engagement, people feel the pressure to kind of say something, but it is okay to take a pause and really collect your thoughts before you answer. In fact, it's most advised. Okay, interview process. What is the interview process? For those of you that have not been on a formal interview before, this is the way it typically works. Greetings and introductions, icebreakers and small talk, questions, typically theirs first and then yours, a summary statement, theirs and yours, closing, and then thank you and follow up. Okay, that's typically the process. It could vary depending on the type of interview and the interviewer, but this is usually the standard. Types of questions. You will get all kinds of questions, but these are some general categories. Open-ended questions, things like tell me about yourself. That's not a yes or no answer. That's something that you have to expand on. Qualifications questions, summary of your academic and experiential background. Proven successes. Please know, all employers want to hear, how have you been successful? So make sure you're writing out lists that reflect on what you've been able to accomplish. Proven successes, really, to me, is one of the huge keys of interviewing. Are you able to speak to past accomplishments? Okay, some others, hypothetical. What would you do if? What would you do if certain things happen? This is something that you can't always plan for because you're not sure what the what if question will be. But be reflective, and I'm going to give you in a moment a strategy to help you kind of walk through these types of questions. Difficult questions to answer: firing, layoff, work gaps, reentry. Again, working with my office, you can come up with answers to help deal with these types of difficult questions. Opinion questions. So what are your strengths? That is completely something that you can answer. And so I do want to say one thing about all of these. Whatever you do in answering these questions, you never want to give the employer any reason to have a red flag, meaning you've now said something that will make them question, wow, I wonder why they said that, or wow, do they have a problem with that? And so you want to make sure that your questions do no harm, or your answers rather do no harm. And so finally, we have offbeat questions. Have you ever received a question like, if you were an animal, what kind of animal would you be? Let me give you a tip for answering these types of offbeat questions. They need to go back to a reflection upon your skills, your strengths, your accomplishments. So if someone were to ask me, if you were an animal, what kind of animal would you be? Which I think is hysterical. I likely would say something like, I would say I would want to be known as an eagle, someone who has great vision, someone who soars above the rest. Do you see where I'm going with that? The key is I'm able to work in some skills, some strengths, some things about myself that I really want the employer to know. Okay, so these questions can be really challenging to answer, but it's necessary for you to practice. And that's why I say, please think about working with our office in order to really strengthen how you answer these types of questions. Okay, really quickly, I just want to show you, if you haven't already looked at the Penn State Career Guide, which you can find on any career services website, please do so, because it is a very comprehensive document. I'm going to show you right now. It's a very comprehensive document that has lots and lots of helpful tips and things in it. And as you can see here, there is a page that lists examples of interview questions. And personally, I say you need to work your way through all of these. If you're not able to answer all of these questions, then you likely are not ready for interviewing. Okay, so please take a look at the Penn State Career Guide. They devote, I think it's around 10 pages to interviewing. And so what types of questions should I ask? There's a whole list here. So as I mentioned earlier, you should be prepared to ask questions. This can help you. Okay, and so I'm not going to belabor that, but please get a hold of the Penn State Career Guide, which you can find on the Penn State Abington Career and Professional Development page. Alrighty. Now, this is really, really important. If you don't remember anything else I said today, please jot this down, take a screen shot of it. But there is a way to answer all of these questions, most questions, which is through this method called the STAR method. And STAR basically stands for, are you able to describe the situation? Are you able to talk about whatever the task is that you needed to complete? Are you able to speak to the action that you took? And very, very important, what was the end result? So if you can remember this formula for answering interview questions, this is going to take you a long way in your interviewing. It is a way to be narrative, yet very concise and to the point about what the bottom line is for the employer. What skills, what accomplishments, how will you achieve, how will you perform? And so that's what they're assessing. And I think the STAR method really walks an employer through your capabilities. And so please make sure you're jotting that down or taking a screenshot to refer back to. Okay, and when you go to the career guide, you will see this duplicated there, and you will see an actual example of how you can answer interview questions using this model. Okay, but basically you're walking them through a narrative of your accomplishment. Really quickly, I want to talk about illegal questions, and this is something for you all to please note. These are things that folks cannot ask you. They cannot ask you about your age or date of birth. Now, I know you're probably thinking, but that's on the application. Yes, applications, they can ask on an application, and No employer should be asking you this because they can find that detail on the application. But if you get asked this, there is a potential that there could be some discrimination of some sort, not necessarily, but there could be. And so that's why the government has said it is illegal to ask these questions: age, date of birth, marital status. Why would that be necessary for someone to know your marital status? And so if they ask you that, again, they could deny you opportunity because maybe you are married. And so that could be a problem. Same thing with parental status. Oh, you have children? Maybe they don't want to hire someone with children, but that in the eyes of the government is illegal. They cannot ask you about your religious background or affiliation unless it's related to the job. Obviously, if you're applying to be a priest, they need to know what your religious background is. Impairments or disabilities irrelevant to the position. They cannot ask you about that. They cannot ask about race and ethnicity. Oftentimes that is on the application as well. Now this one is important to note. They cannot ask you about arrest history. They can ask you if you've been convicted. There is a difference. I could be arrested every day of the week. That doesn't mean that they can ask me about that. They certainly can ask, have you ever been convicted? And usually, again, that is on an application, not something that's usually asked in an actual interview. National origin would be another illegal question unless it is related to the job. And so it really does depend. And then certainly they cannot ask you about mental health issues. Please know your rights before you interview. Now, it's important to note, what is the proper response? So you really want this job, you really want to work for this company, but I feel as if I'm being asked an illegal question. What are you going to do? Of course, you're not going to hit the table and say, you're asking me an illegal question. I think the more proper way to handle it is to either answer, because you're okay with answering the information, if you don't feel like it's a problem. You can refuse to answer, and I would say do so delicately. I would say something like, can you explain to me why that would be relevant to the position? So there is a way not to answer, but I would do so politely so as not to offend the interviewer, unless it's just outright blatant. You can see that there's some blatant discrimination happening, which does happen, unfortunately. Most importantly, I think this third bullet is the key. Examine the interviewer's intent. It could be an ignorant, perhaps you all got on the subject of talking about family life, and then they did say, oh, how many children do you have? Innocently asked you because you started talking about family. You can answer in brief or ignore the question altogether and redirect the discussion to a new topic. However, if you're sensing blatant discrimination, especially in this, very charged political climate that we're all living through, you have the right to terminate the interview. And that's really important, that you feel empowered to say, I don't know that this is the right fit for me, and I'd like to end the interview at this time. It is perfectly fine to say that. And again, if these are things that you feel like, I don't know that I'd be able to handle this, this is something our office can work with you on. So please think about that. But it is important to note that most times I have found it's out of ignorance that people may ask you one of the questions that you see here, that they didn't intend to offend or illegally or violate any governmental policies. It's just maybe they were unaware. Okay, so again, I'm not going to belabor this slide. I think in the career guide you will see some questions to ask, but I want to say, if you come up with no other question, the very one question that you should absolutely ask on every interview is, what are the next steps? When can I expect to hear from you? If you don't know that, you're going to leave that interview kind of frustrated. Are they going to get back to me in a week, 2 weeks, a month from now? And so it's really important that you have some sense of when you will hear from them one way or the other. And so please, if no other question is asked, that should be the very last question that you pose. Okay, closing the interview. Closing is a great time for you to reiterate why you are the best candidate, reassert your interests, and very important, it's a great time for recovery. And what do I mean by recovery? Let's say you answer a question and you absolutely are like, I really messed that question up. This is a time to say, earlier I mentioned the following. I had a chance to really think about it since you posed the question, and I want to just go back and answer it again if that's okay. And so that's a place for recovery before the interview ends. And then finally, you want to thank each interviewer by name. You want to request business cards or contact information for all of the interviewers. And why is that so important? Because you should be doing follow-up afterwards by sending a thank you note, okay? And I'm going to tell you, it's shocking how many people neglect to do this. Again, I told you my husband's a recruiter, and he tells me all the time, he says it is a rarity these days to get someone to reply with a thank you note. And a card goes even much further, because it's something people rarely get, to actually receive a piece of mail with a card or a formal letter. And so, but at minimum, you should follow up with an email to say thank you to the employer for taking their time. There is a sample thank you letter in the career guide to help you if you're not certain what you should say. Again, follow-up contact to check on the status of hiring, the hiring decision. So for example, if they told you that we'll be in touch in a week, but it's 2 weeks have passed, you have a right to follow up with the employer to find out the status of your interview. It could be that they are still in process of interviewing other candidates. Okay, I'm not going to be able to get into too much of this, but I want you to take note of this as well. When you want to consider the offer, what are some things that you should be thinking about? Certainly personal and environmental fit, financial compensation. If you're going to accept a job that you know will not cover your bills and your expenses and things like that, likely you're going to end up with some frustration once you're in the position. So be honest with yourself about what you really can afford to take. Job responsibilities, time considerations, organizational culture, location and amenities, and any additional considerations that you have personally for your particular family situation. Does it fit with the offer that you received? And yes, it is okay to negotiate, but please know exactly what you're negotiating for. And very important, I want you all to hear this, which is super important. Be careful what you're haggling over. So for example, if you're haggling over 1 or 2% or even 3%, I want you to actually go and do the math. How much is that 3% over time? Okay, it may not be as much money as you're talking about. Let's say you are, you were offered a $30,000 job, and but you want an increase of, like 5%. How much money is that exactly over the course of a year? Monthly or biweekly paychecks. And so it's really important to be careful, because what you don't want to do is leave the impression that you're only in it for the money versus the work, the experience, the career opportunity. And so yes, we all need money, and we all need as much money as we can get. But be careful, because what's the impression that might be made in the mind of an employer? And so please work with all of the career services offices at Penn State to really finesse this. There is an art to negotiating, and it's important that you know how to navigate that conversation. Okay, after the interview, if you don't get the offer, analyze your interview performance. Where do you think you went wrong? What areas could you have done better? But please know this, it's important for you to note this. Sometimes it's not even about your performance. Perhaps they already had someone in mind for the position. Perhaps someone outperformed you in terms of a direct match. I think it's really, really important that you're able to to really step back from you and really look at the performance overall. Sometimes it's not anything that you've done, but it's something on their end. Maybe sometimes they think you're too expensive, and that they really can't hire you based on their budget. It is okay to ask for feedback from the interviewer, but please know most companies have a policy around that they don't want employers to give that kind of feedback to candidates because it could potentially put them in some type of legal consequence. And so if a candidate thought they were being discriminated against, giving feedback could actually end up backfiring for the company. So sometimes they can't give you feedback. Please know that. Continue to enhance and practice your interviewing skills. I think that's a better use of your time and energy. Do not burn bridges. Whatever you do, don't fire off, I think you're wrong and you made a bad mistake not hiring me. That's not the way to handle it. I find that most industries, especially in a certain region, are actually very small. And people talk to one another. And so if I think the right thing to do is try to seek out some, information about your performance versus getting upset about not getting the job. And then most importantly, stay positive. There are a ton of companies out there, a ton of organizations. And so if that didn't work out, stay positive, try to make the best of it, and most importantly, begin to continue to work on yourself and get prepared for the next opportunity. Okay, we're coming to the end here, guys. Pitfalls to avoid. Again, I'm not going to go through this whole list, but I am going to hit a few of them. Being late is never, ever excusable unless you were in an accident or some other major thing occurred. But if you're just home, and you're 5 minutes late to get on a Zoom call, I think that's inappropriate. People are taking time out of their day to be on a call with you. You should be able to show up. And whether it's online or in person, you should be there 10 to 15 minutes before that interview starts. Inappropriate attire, please know your industry. What is appropriate for the industry that you want to be a part of? You have to do your research. I've already talked about that, so I'm not going to go through all of that. You want to, at all times, think about how you're coming across. I always like to play a little trick, which is pretend that I'm the manager. What would I be looking for? And so you want to make sure that you are stressing that throughout the interview. Never, ever, ever, it is never, ever worth it lying on your application or lying in the interview, over exaggerating your experiences or your credentials. It is just not worth it. It could come back to bite you at a later time and actually even get you fired. And so I think it's really appropriate to be just honest about your background. And if it is a great match, then it's going to be a great match. If it's not, it's likely to come out at some point. Try to avoid bragging. Again, that's in line with, lying or over exaggerating. And then again, think about your major goal and what you're there for. And so if you can do that, all roads need to lead to obtaining that position. Again, I like to really use the mantra, do no harm. If you answer honestly and you answer showcasing your skills, your knowledge, your abilities, I don't see how an interview could go wrong unless, again, there could be a myriad of reasons why you aren't the chosen candidate, including they could already have someone in mind for the position or someone outperformed on the interview, or there could be budgetary issues. So again, I don't want you to beat yourself up. I want you to get ready for the next opportunity. Okay, with that said, I love this quote, and I will take your questions, but with that said, I love this quote because I actually think this is the key to interviewing. Success is where preparation, being well prepared, and opportunity meet. And again, our team is always available to work with you, the Career and Professional Development team, as well as career services offices throughout Penn State. And so please be in touch with your respective office, or please get in touch with our office and we will assist you as well. But thank you for being a great audience. I hope you learned something here today. There are lots of nuances to interviewing, but the key is practice, prepare, think about how you want to put yourself forward. Okay. Until we meet again, thank you for being here. And don't forget, next Tuesday at 1 o'clock, we have our next webinar, and you can view the full list on our website. Thank you and have a great day.